Welcome back to HVAC Technician Talk Podcast. I'm John. So one of the most questions I get from followers or subscribers to help them with is the X13 blower motor. Let's talk about the X13 blower motor. So I'll get a text message or a phone call or a Facebook message, and it'll say, "Hey, John, I'm working on a unit, and it's got a X13 fan motor." Now, there's two other types of ECM fan motors. Actually, there's two other variable speeds. There's X13 and variable speed, but you have the traditional 16-pin variable speed motor, and then you have the new 5-pin variable speed motor. We're not here to talk about those in this episode. We will talk about those on another podcast. We are talking about the X13 blower motor because I get a lot of questions, and a lot of, it's nothing's happening. The outdoor unit's running, but no fan motor. Or I'll get, hey, the fan's just kind of rocking back and forth. All right, so let's talk about how to troubleshoot the X13 blower motor. It's very, very simple, okay? You have two plugs, or you might have a plug and two wires on the bottom, or you may have no plugs. You might have individual wires across the top and the bottom. X13 blower motors have line voltage present to them at all times. There's no relay. So if it's an air handler, there's 208, 230 going to that motor at all times. 24 volts is the signal to start the motor. And it depends on what mode it's in, if you're in electric heat mode or if you're in cooling mode or whatever. If it's a gas furnace, you got 115 volts going to the motor at all times. 24 volts is what starts the motor. Now, with these motors, I was told one time by a tech support guy, and this goes for variable speed too, if it's rocking, doing that clunk, 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 that rock, you really don't need to go any further. That's telling them and telling you that it's got line voltage because it's rocking, and it's got a signal because it's trying to turn. So really, you don't need to go any further. Whether it's variable speed or X13, that's a bad motor. But most of the time, it's just the module that's bad. But a lot of manufacturers are not selling just the module anymore. They used to. Now, here's how you can determine if it is just the module. Because if it is just the module, all you got to do is take the two big bolts, the two long bolts off. You don't have to take the blower motor out of the wheel or anything. It's a very easy repair. I know for a fact ICP sells just the modules because I've done a bunch of them. Sometimes that's all they have in stock. Now, if they have the combination, if it's in warranty and they have the combination in stock, then I do the combination of the motor and the module. So this is how you determine that your motor is good and it's just a bad module. What you want to do is kill the power. And you're going to want to wait about 5 minutes because when you take that module off the back of that motor, you got two huge capacitors in there. And an X13 motor is essentially a three-phase motor. And the capacitors are built into the module. If you don't give those capacitors time to discharge, they will knock the piss out of you. So you take the two bolts off of the module and you separate the module from the motor. You'll see a plug. You unplug the plug. you want to ohm out the motor, not the module. You can't ohm out a module. A module is like a control board. We don't excuse me. We don't ohm out control boards, so you can't ohm out a module. Now, to ohm out that motor, all you have to do is go across all three legs. You should have the exact same amount of resistance between all three legs. Because again, it is essentially a three-phase motor. So if you take the module off and you ohm out the motor, and between all three legs you have the same amount of resistance, and the motor spins free, like if you could spin it with your hand and it spins free, chances are the motor is just fine. All you need is a module. But again, a lot of manufacturers are not selling just the module. I know Carrier and ICP do. And a lot of times you'll call and you'll say, well, I want the motor and the module. And they'll say, well, all we have is the module. But so if you ohm out that motor and it spins free, then you can get away with just the module. But if it's under warranty and your supplier has the combination, I highly recommend that you do the motor and the module. It's just a safer bet. But there are times where I've done just the module, or if it's not in warranty, you know, it's a lot cheaper to change just the module, or get you one of those Evergreen X13 motors, or the U.S. motors made by the Rescue EZ13 made by U.S. Motors. I really like those too. I've been using those. So that's how you determine, you know, if it's the module or the motor. But again, it's always best practice to replace both pieces. Now, again, you ohm out the motor, and if the motor spins free and you got the same amount of resistance across all three windings, then your motor's fine, and more than likely it's just a module. But like I said, if it's in warranty and you can get your hands on both pieces, that is the way to go. With variable speed, it works a little bit different. You know, you got the with a variable speed motor, you can't really check it that way. There is a tester that they make. It's called the TechMate, I think. It's made by Regal, which is Gentech, and it's made to test the 16-pin variable speed motor and the new 5-pin. Now, the variable speed motors, one is a constant airflow. See, the X13 is a constant torque, and then you have constant airflow. I don't remember if that's the 16-pin or the other one, and then I can't remember what the other one's called. It's constant airflow. Constant torque is the X13, and constant, I can't remember. But that tester is made to test the new 5-pin variable speed motor and the old style, which is still being used, 16-pin variable speed blower motor. You leave the high voltage plugged in, you unplug the low voltage plug, and you plug in the TechMate tester, and then you have two alligator clamps. You want to grab red and common off 24 volts, and then you flip the switch. You know, you want to make sure your light is green on the tool, and if you flip that switch on and the motor doesn't come on, then the motor's bad. If the motor does come on, then obviously it's the board, you know, or wherever it's getting its 24 volts from. But again, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We'll talk about those other two motors in another episode, but I thought I would touch on them just a little bit. But if you don't have that TechMate variable speed motor tester, I highly recommend that you get one. It's the easiest way to test for a variable speed blower motor. Now, if a variable speed blower motor is doing that rocking, you know, that cluck, 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 back and forth, there's really no need to test it. I've had Goodman Tech Support tell me, and Ring Tech Support and Linux Tech Support tell me that if that motor's rocking back and forth like that, you don't really need to test anything. That's telling them that it's getting high voltage and it's getting a low voltage signal, and it's bad. The module has just went bad. You need to replace the motor and the module. So if you're getting that clunk, clunk, you know, it doesn't really pay to waste your time. Just replace it. But if nothing is happening, you don't want to just guess and say, oh, well, it's a bad motor or a bad module. No, you need to test. With an X13, again, you should have 230 volts present at all times, or 115 if it's a gas furnace, and then 24 volts to bring the motor on. Now, let's talk about where on the X13 where you get those voltages. So you're going to have a neutral tap and a line tap. Between neutral and line, you should have 208, 230, or 115 if it's a gas furnace. Now, you have a common terminal that's on the high voltage plug, but it is low voltage common. So between common and one of your speed taps, whichever one's being used, you should have 24 volts between common and that tap. And if you have both of those, if you have your line voltage and you have your 24 volts between common and the tap, the motor is bad. And it's not spinning, the motor is bad. But if you don't have that line voltage, you need to figure out why. If you're not getting, or if you do have line voltage, but you don't have 24 volts between common and one of those taps, you need to figure out why. Because it may not be bad. You're not getting the proper voltage. But if you're getting that 208, 230, or the 115 between neutral and line, and then 24 volts between common and the speed tap, the motor is bad. So, yeah, I hope that helps some of you guys out. I get that a lot about X13 fan motors. X13 fan motors have a bad rep, but I mean, I don't really mind them too much. They're easy to troubleshoot. They're easy to work on. So variable speed motors are pretty easy too, because especially if you have that tool that I told you guys about. But we'll touch on variable speed motors in another episode. But I thought I would. Well, we'll talk about them, I should say. I touched on them a little bit. So I hope this helps some of you guys. And yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks for listening to the HVAC Technician Talk Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the HVAC Technician Talk Podcast. We're always looking for recommendations on topics for the show. You can text us at 337-541-1252 or email us at hvactechniciantalk@gmail.com. We'll talk to y'all on the next one.